I was a soldier in the war against the Xeno Horde. I never wanted to be a soldier. I never wanted to hold a rifle, watch my friends die, or fight an enemy that didn't fear death. But when the Xeno Horde came, I had no choice. No one did. They didn't come for conquest. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to exterminate. We called them the Horde because that's what they were, a swarm of creatures, millions strong, flooding across entire star systems. They didn't just destroy civilizations. They erased them. Planets we had called home for centuries, gone in hours. Cities that had stood for generations, reduced to nothing but dust. And we were just meat to them. To the Horde, humanity wasn't an enemy. We were prey. The day it all began. It started with one planet, Sigma 9, a colony world on the far edge of human space. A place so remote, it should have been safe. Until one day, all contact was lost. At first, Command thought it was a malfunction, maybe a power failure, a communication blackout. But then we received the distress signal, a single transmission looping over and over, a voice filled with terror. They're here. They came from the sky. We can't stop them. God help us, then silence. Colony of 3 million people had just vanished. No survivors, no escape pods, no wreckage, just nothing. And that's when the military stepped in. My first deployment, I was a recruit, a soldier with 6 months of training and a rifle I had barely learned to use. When the order came, I was shipped out with the 1st Expeditionary Fleet. Our mission, investigate Sigma 9. Find out what happened. Bring back any survivors. I still remember the moment we came out of hyperspace. The planet was still there, but something was wrong. The sky was darker than it should have been, like something was moving in the upper atmosphere. And as our dropships descended, I saw it, for the first time, the graveyard of Sigma 9. The cities were gone, not bombed, not burned, just emptied. Skyscrapers stood perfectly intact. But there were no people, no bodies, not even blood, as if every single person had just disappeared. I gripped my rifle tighter, something wasn't right, and then we heard the screams. The first contact, it came from the streets below, echoing through the ruins, bouncing off the empty buildings. Not just one scream. Hundreds. Thousands. I will never forget what I saw next. They crawled out from the darkness. Out of alleyways, out of sewer grates, out of shattered windows. Things that were not human. Their bodies were twisted. Their limbs too long, their eyes pitch black. Some of them wore human clothing, ripped, torn, as if they had once been people, and then they charged. I opened fire. We all did. Our bullets ripped into them, tearing through flesh and bone. But they didn't stop. They never stopped. Even as they were torn apart, they kept coming like a swarm, like a horde. And for the first time, I truly understood. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a war. The first time I saw a man get ripped apart, I froze. One of our scouts, Ramirez, he was fast. Always first to check a building, always the guy who kept us moving. But that didn't matter. The second he turned a corner, he was gone. One of those. Things leaped from the shadows, twice his size, with claws like blades. It tackled him, slammed him against a wall, and before anyone could even shout his name, it started tearing him open. He was screaming for us to help him, but we couldn't, because the Horde was already on us. The city becomes a war zone. I don't remember who fired first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the guy next to me. Maybe. It didn't matter, because a second later, the entire street lit up with gunfire. We unloaded everything we had. Rifles, shotguns, flamethrowers, and still, they kept coming. The bullets tore through their bodies, shredding flesh, snapping bones, but they didn't feel pain. They didn't stop. Some of them crawled on all fours, skittering over walls like insects. Others ran like humans, but faster. Too fast. I saw one take 10 rounds to the chest and still lunge at a soldier, sinking its teeth straight into his throat. They weren't just strong, they were relentless, and for every one we killed, 10 more came. The fight turns to chaos. We fell back, trying to reach the dropships. But the creatures were hurting us, pushing us deeper into the city, cutting off our escape routes. We were rats in a maze. And the Horde? They were the hunters. The wall of bodies. Some soldiers panicked, tried to run. They didn't make it 10 steps before the Xenos tore them apart. I remember Sergeant Vickers grabbing me by the armor, pulling me behind cover. "You stay in the fight, soldier, you hear me? You stay in the damn fight." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about winning, this was about surviving. The evacuation. Fails after 20 minutes of hell, we finally reached the evacuation zone, or what was left of it. The dropships were on fire. The pilots were dead. And above us, a Xeno mothership was descending. For the first time, I saw what we were really fighting. This wasn't some mindless swarm. This was a calculated invasion. They had planned this. They had waited for us. And now, we were trapped. The last stand at Sigma 9. The order came, through the comms. No retreat, no surrender, hold the line. So we did. We dug in, setting up barricades with wreckage. We used every last bullet, every grenade, every flamethrower. We fought like cornered animals. And still, the Xenos kept coming. The Horde wasn't just winning. They were playing with us, testing us, because they didn't see us as a threat. To them, we were already dead. The reinforcements arrive. 2 late hours passed. The Horde never slowed down. But just when I thought I was about to die, the sky erupted. The human Second Fleet arrived, warships bigger than cities dropping orbital strikes straight into the Horde. The Xenos screamed. For the first time they felt fear, and then, just as fast as they had appeared, they vanished. The cost of survival when the smoke cleared. There were only a handful of us left. We had started with thousands. Now maybe 200 remained. Sigma 9 was lost. But the real war? It was just beginning. Because this wasn't just an invasion. This was extermination. And humanity had just been marked for extinction. We barely escaped Sigma 9. Out of the thousands of troops deployed, only a handful of us made it off-world. And as our dropships tore through the atmosphere, I looked down at what was left of the colony. It wasn't burning. It wasn't destroyed. It was consumed. As if the Xenos had absorbed everything. The buildings, the people, the very life of the planet. And as we jumped to hyperspace, a cold realization hit me. Sigma 9 wasn't the first. It was just the beginning. The war reaches Earth's doorstep. We had hoped the fleet could stop them, that our warships would hold the line, that the Xenos couldn't push deeper into human space. We were wrong. The Horde didn't slow down. They didn't stop to consolidate territory. They didn't act like a conquering force. They acted like a plague, spreading, growing, devouring. Within weeks, they had wiped out 12 more colonies. Within months, the outer human worlds were gone, and then they reached Sol and they reached Earth, the first defense fleet. Humanity's last hope. Earth was our stronghold, the heart of our military, our leadership, our people, the last planet we could not afford to lose. So, we sent everything. The first defense fleet, the largest armada ever assembled, 1,000 warships, millions of soldiers, weapons capable of shattering planets. It was supposed to be our greatest stand. It turned into our greatest massacre. The Battle of Jupiter's Orbit. The Xenos didn't attack Earth directly. They were smarter than that. They came in waves, spreading their forces, hitting us where we were weakest. And the first defense fleet? It met them at Jupiter. I was there, standing on the deck of a battlecruiser watching from orbit as the Horde came in like a storm. We opened fire. Every railgun, every missile battery, every plasma cannon we had, and for a moment, it looked like we were winning. The first wave of Xenoships collapsed, their organic hulls burning apart under our firepower. But then the second wave hit, then the third, then the fourth, and before we even realized it, we were surrounded. The massacre begins. The Xenos had been studying us, learning how we fought, and now, they used it against us. They jammed our comms. They cut our supply lines. They shut down our warp drives. We were trapped. Ships exploded all around, me torn apart by acidic beams that melted through steel like butter. The flagship Titan's Wrath, one of Earth's most powerful warships, was ripped in half by a Xeno Leviathan. Watched escape pods try to flee. They didn't make it. The Xenos didn't just destroy them, they absorbed them. Humans, screaming for help, pulled into the darkness, never to be seen again. And then, I heard the words that still haunt me to this day. Fall back. Earth is lost. The desperate retreat. The fleet was shattered. Those of us who survived had no choice. We ran, fleeing past Mars, past the asteroid belt, heading for the only safe place left, Earth's defensive ring. But as we jumped back to orbit, we saw it. The Xenos had already landed. They were on Earth, and our home had become a battleground. Earth was burning. By the time my unit made it to the surface, the war had already reached the cities. I had seen battles. I had seen men die. But nothing could prepare me for this. The Xenos weren't just invading. They were butchering. Millions of people screaming, running, trying to escape. And the Horde swallowed them whole. There were no battle lines, no fronts. The war was everywhere. The fall of the megacities, New York, London, Tokyo, Shanghai, gone within days. The Xenos didn't fight like us. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't occupy cities. They consumed them. Buildings collapsed under waves of crawling horrors. Streets were flooded with human bodies, twisted into something else. And in the skies, massive Xeno Leviathans, miles long, released swarms of flying monstrosities. Nowhere was safe. No one was spared. The underground resistance. We couldn't fight them in the open, so we fought them from the shadows. We retreated into the underground. Bunkers, the old tunnels, the places where the Xenos hadn't reached yet. That's where the real war began. Not fleets, not armies, not governments, just survivors, just soldiers with nothing left to lose. And for the first time, we started to understand the enemy. The horrifying truth captured Xeno bodies rotted differently. They didn't bleed. They didn't decompose. They changed. Their flesh pulsed. Their bones shifted, as if they were still alive. Even after death, they were evolving. And then, we found the worst part. The bodies weren't all alien. Some of them were human, twisted, morphed. As if the Horde wasn't just killing us, they were turning us into them. The first human-Xeno hybrid, we found it in a bunker, or, what was left of it, a soldier, one of ours. Still in his armor, still holding his rifle. But his skin was wrong. Too smooth. Too dark. His eyes were pitch black. His fingers had extended into claws. And when he opened his mouth, he didn't speak. He screamed, and then he attacked. The war gets worse. We thought we were fighting a race, an enemy we could outthink, outmaneuver, outgun, but the truth was far worse. The Xenos were a virus, a force that absorbed everything. If they killed you, you were gone. If they captured you, you became one of them. And Earth was falling, day by day, hour by hour. And there was only one way to stop it. We had to take the fight to the source. We had to find the hive, and we had to burn it to the ground. Earth was no longer a planet. It was a graveyard. The megacities were gone. Governments had fallen. The Xenos controlled everything above ground, and we, what was left of us, were buried in the underground tunnels, fighting like rats. But we weren't dead yet, and we weren't giving up. If Earth was going to fall, we were taking as many Xenos with us as we could, the birth of the resistance. The first resistance wasn't an army. It was survivors, soldiers, engineers, civilians, anyone who could still hold a gun. We gathered in the ruins, in the old military bunkers, in the deepest parts of the cities where the Horde hadn't fully reached yet, and we started striking back. Guerrilla warfare. Against the Horde, we knew we couldn't win a straight fight. The Xenos had too many numbers, too much firepower. So we fought. Dirty hit-and-run attacks, ambushes in the dark, traps made from old human tech. We used everything we had, destroyed their supply routes, sabotaged their hives, turned their own dead against them, and for the first time, the Horde hesitated. They weren't used to being hunted, they weren't used to losing, and that gave us an opening. The first major victory, we had one goal: take back a city. Not the whole planet, not the whole system, just one city, a symbol that humanity wasn't done yet. We chose Fort Exodus, one of the last major military bases on Earth buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The Xenos controlled the surface, but the lower levels? That was ours, and inside the deepest bunkers? There was something we needed, the last stockpile of pre-war experimental weapons. If we could get to it, we might actually stand a chance. The battle for Fort Exodus. We launched the attack at night, under the cover of the thick, polluted skies. Every resistance cell, hundreds of fighters, struck at the same time. We hit their nests first, firebombed them, collapsing buildings on top of the swarm. Then we pushed toward the base, fighting through Xeno patrols, pushing deeper into their lines. The Horde was fast, but we were desperate, and desperation can make a man unstoppable. The turning point. We made it to the bunkers, sealed the blast doors, and inside? Weapons. Not just rifles, not just explosives, but prototypes. Tech that had been too dangerous for the old governments to use. Plasma cannons, electromagnetic railguns, and something even crazier. A bomb. The kind that didn't just destroy matter, but reality itself. A weapon that could erase a Xeno hive. Not burn it. Not crush it. Erase it. And that's when we made our next decision. We weren't just going to hold one city. We were going to strike the Horde where it hurt. We were going to hunt their leaders, because we finally had the firepower to fight back. The war wasn't over, yet we thought Earth was lost. We thought we were the last survivors. But after Fort Exodus, we realized something. Humanity wasn't done fighting. We weren't just a dying species. We were an army, and if the Xenos wanted to finish us off, they were going to have to earn it. Because now, for the first time, we had hope, and we had a plan. Hope is a dangerous thing. For months we had been hiding, running, surviving. But after Fort Exodus, everything changed. For the first time, we weren't just reacting. We were fighting back. We had weapons, we had a plan, and we had a target. The Xenos. weren't just a mindless swarm. They had leaders, hive minds, commanders that controlled entire legions. If we could kill them, we could break the Horde, and we knew where to start. The first intel on the Xeno command structure. For years we had assumed the Xenos were instinct-driven, a biological plague spreading without thought or strategy. We were wrong. They had hierarchies. They had tactics. They had a chain of command, and at the top, the Hive Master, the one controlling the entire invasion. We didn't know what it looked like, didn't know what it was, but we had one lead, a location, deep in the ruins of old Europe, buried beneath what was once the city of Berlin. There was a Hive Core, one of the Xeno's primary command centers. If we could take it out, the war would finally turn in our favor, or so we hoped. The suicide mission begins. The strike team was chosen. Not the biggest, not the strongest, just the best. I was one of them. We were sent in on a stealth transport, skimming low over the wasteland, avoiding the Xeno patrols. Our weapons were modified, upgraded with the new tech from Fort Exodus. But we all knew the truth. This was a suicide mission. We weren't expected to make it back. And if we failed, humanity was finished. Into the heart of the swarm, we hit the ground hard. Immediately the air was thick with the stench of death. The city was a graveyard. Skyscrapers half-eaten by organic growths. Streets filled with twisted bodies, frozen in grotesque shapes. And beneath it all, the hive, a pulsing living structure, embedded in the ruins, a fortress of flesh and bone. We didn't have time to think, because the Xenos had already noticed us. The battle in the hive. We went in guns blazing. Our new weapons tore through the Horde, disintegrating entire creatures in seconds. But the deeper we pushed, the worse it got. The walls moved. The floors shifted beneath us. It was like the hive itself was alive. And then we saw them. The Royal Guard. Larger than anything we had fought before. Not just beasts, warriors. Their armor was impenetrable. Their claws could cut through steel. And they weren't just defending the hive. They were protecting something far worse. The truth about the Xenos. We fought our way into the deepest chamber, expecting to find the Hive Master. A leader, queen, something we could kill. Instead, we found a machine, buried beneath layers of organic filth. A structure of metal and circuitry, ancient beyond measure, pulsing, alive. And that's when we realized the Xenos weren't the real enemy. They were just soldiers, pawns, a biological army created by something far older than them, something far worse, and that something had been watching us, studying us, waiting for us to come to them, and now, they knew we were here. The trap is sprung. The hive wasn't just a command center, it was a beacon. A signal that had been broadcasting into deep space. And the second we breached its core, the transmission changed. It wasn't calling the Xenos anymore. It was calling something else. And whatever was coming, it was something even the Xenos feared. We had just made the biggest mistake of the war. The moment the Hive Core's signal changed, we knew something was wrong. The Xenos, the mindless, relentless killing machines that had wiped out entire civilizations, had suddenly stopped fighting. They froze. Their screams turned into something else. Something like fear. And that's when we knew. We weren't the only ones who had been hunting the Xenos. Something else was coming. Something that even the Horde was afraid of, and we had just called it here. The sky opens. We were still deep in the hive, but our scouts outside saw it first. The sky, pitch black and broken, Something had ripped open the fabric of space itself, a tear in reality, and through it, they came. Not ships, not creatures, not anything we could understand. But something worse. Things, with shifting forms, liquid and solid at the same time. Beings with no faces, no bodies, just masses of dark energy. They didn't fly. They didn't walk. They simply moved. And wherever they passed, matter itself unraveled. Cities collapsed. Entire landscapes erased. And the Xenos? They ran. The unstoppable horde, the creatures that had wiped out billions, were fleeing. Because they weren't the apex predators. They were just another prey. The hive falls apart. The ground beneath us began to shift. The walls started melting. Like wax under a flame, the hive wasn't dying, it was transforming. Whatever was happening outside, whatever these new beings were, they were rewriting reality itself. And we were trapped inside. We had minutes, maybe seconds, to escape. But the Xenos had blocked every exit. Not to fight us, not to kill us, but because they were just as trapped as we were. And for the first time in the entire war, we were on the same side. The impossible alliance. No one spoke. No one gave an order. But in that moment, we all understood. If we wanted to survive, we had to fight together. The few remaining human soldiers stood back to back with the Xeno warriors. We didn't trust them. They didn't trust us. But none of that mattered anymore, because something else was coming for all of us. And if we didn't make it out of that hive, there wouldn't be anything left to fight over. The escape we ran, through the melting tunnels, dodging collapsing walls and floors that had turned into liquid shadow. The hive was coming apart, sucked into some dark abyss. We reached the surface, just in time to see the sky tear open completely. The darkness above wasn't just spreading, it was alive. It moved like a beast, tendrils of blackness reaching out, consuming everything. And then we saw what was inside it. Not ships, not monsters. Something far worse. A presence. Something that shouldn't exist. A force so vast, so alien, that even looking at it made my head split with pain. It didn't speak, didn't make a sound, but we all heard it. In our minds, in our bones, a single word, a warning. Kneel, the turning point. We had spent years fighting the Horde. We thought they were the greatest threat to our existence. But now we knew the truth. The Xenos weren't the invaders. They weren't the destroyers of civilizations. They were just the first line of defense. A biological army engineered by some ancient force to stand against this thing. And we had just crippled that defense. The Xenos had been trying to conquer us because they thought we were a threat. But they weren't trying to wipe us out. They were trying to make us strong enough to fight what was coming, and now it was here and we were not ready. The sky had ripped apart. The ground beneath us shattered, and the voice, that impossible voice, echoed in our heads commanding one thing: kneel. But we didn't. We couldn't. Not to the Horde. Not to this new enemy. If we had to die, we were going to die on our feet. The unraveling of reality. The world around us wasn't stable anymore. Time glitched. 1 second. I was standing in the ruins of the hive. The next I was somewhere else. A battlefield from 1,000 years ago. A memory I had never lived. A vision of a future that didn't exist. And then, back, the hive. The war. The impossible thing looming over us. Whatever this entity was, it wasn't just destroying us, it was breaking reality itself. And the worst part? It was playing with us. Like a predator testing its prey. The alliance between enemies. The Xenos weren't attacking us anymore. We weren't attacking them. Because we all knew the truth now. We had been fighting the wrong war. Humanity and the Xenos had been locked in a cycle of destruction. But we weren't the real war. We were the warm-up, a test. And the real enemy? It had finally arrived, so we did the unthinkable. We fought together. The first strike against the darkness. The Xeno warriors, beasts we had spent years trying to kill, stood beside us as we turned our weapons on the real enemy. The darkness, the shifting, mind-breaking mass of pure destruction. We opened fire, bullets, plasma, explosives. The Xenos unleashed their bioweapons, launching acidic spores and energy pulses at the entity. And for a moment, we thought we were doing something, until we realized it wasn't fighting back, it was just watching, learning, and that's when it spoke again. Not in words, not in sound, but in thought. A voice that didn't belong in this universe. You are not worthy. You were never worthy. Your existence is a mistake. And then, it moved. The massacre begins. There are few things in this universe I truly fear. The Xenos were one. But this was something else. We thought it would attack like the Horde fast. Brutal, a storm of claws and fangs. We were wrong. It didn't fight, it unmade. Wherever it touched, things just ceased to be. Not destroyed, not burned, not vaporized, erased, like they had never existed at all. Ships vanished. Soldiers disappeared mid-step. Even the Xenos, creatures we had believed to be the pinnacle of biological evolution, were wiped from existence in a single breath. And we? We were next, the final strategy. The Xenos screamed in a language we didn't understand. Their warriors rushed forward, throwing themselves into the void, trying to slow it down. They failed. But in that moment, something clicked. They weren't attacking. They were buying time. For us. One of the surviving Xeno commanders turned toward me, its black, soulless eyes locking onto mine. And then it spoke. Its voice was garbled, its words barely understandable through our translator systems. But I understood what it meant, the weapon. Use the weapon. And then it charged into the darkness, and was gone. The doomsday bombback at Fort Exodus, we had uncovered a weapon, a last resort device designed by human scientists before the war even began. Not a nuclear bomb, not a planet killer. Something worse. A weapon that didn't just destroy matter. It destroyed existence itself. The void eraser. We had never used it, because we had never truly needed it. Until now. I grabbed the detonator from my pack. It was a one-way mission, a dead man's switch. Whoever armed it wasn't coming back, and I was ready. But before I could activate it, someone else did. The ultimate sacrifice. One of the last Xeno generals, a creature we had spent years trying to kill, snatched the bomb from my hands. And in that moment, I understood. This war had never been about us versus them. It had always been about survival. And now we were fighting on the same side. The Xeno looked at me one last time. Then it charged straight into the darkness. The entity reacted. For the first time, it hesitated. It knew what was coming. And before it could stop it, before it could unmake the weapon, the Xeno triggered the detonation. A light brighter than 1,000 stars erupted across the battlefield, and the darkness was gone. The aftermath: when I woke up, I was on a ship, Human.Xeno. It didn't matter anymore. The war was over. The entity was gone. The Horde had been broken, and Earth? It was still there, scarred, ruined, but still alive. We had survived. But at what cost? The Xenos had been nearly wiped out. Our armies had been shattered, and we knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. The entity hadn't been defeated. It had been pushed back. For now. But one day, it would return. And when it did, we would be ready. Because we were no longer just soldiers. We were the survivors of the last war. And if the universe ever threatened us again, we wouldn't just fight. We would win.